Welcome to part 2 of the Pottery Cottage murders. We left off with Gillian having shared her situation with her neighbours. Next time you see me, I'll be in a different outfit because I recorded what you're about to see before now. Does that make sense? So enjoy, and I'll see you on the other side. So she closes the door. She's like, yeah, they're going to help. And Len and Joyce talk about what they're going to do. And they're like, right, play along. Play along with it, keep it sweet, tow them out, and as soon as they're on their merry way, we will ring the police. Now, there was no telephone at Seconds, so they were like, you know, they'll go off, and they probably thought that they would go to Pottery Cottage and ring the police from there. When Len left his house to go and get his car from the garage to go and help them tow them, he sees Amy. Now, Amy is injured and badly, and she calls his name and then she just disappeared out of sight, like she fell. And this is when Len realised, like, we've got a situation on our hands, like he's hurt somebody. So instead of playing along, he gets his wife Joyce, they get themselves in their car and they go. So they speed past the car in the tow and they peg it. And obviously Billy's like, you told them. Like, they know you told them, and now we're in a situation. So he's furious, even more furious now, because he thinks that she's told on him, basically, and said what's going on. She's like, no, I didn't, crying. It's all like very high, like, atmosphere at this point. She just wants to get out of there and make sure that everyone's safe and happy. She doesn't know that her mum's been hurt. As they're having this argument about her talking to Len, Amy appears. Amy appears at the front door of the cottage and she staggers out slowly towards them. And at this point, Gillian sees that her mum has been really seriously hurt. She's got a wound to her neck, which is bleeding, and there's blood, and it's just awful. And Gillian just is freaked out. She's like screaming, my mum, what have you done to my mum? And Billy gets to Amy and sort of drags her through the snow under her arms, and like by her arms, and drags her away from Gillian. And Gillian, that's the last time that Gillian sees her mum. At this point, Billy grabs Gillian by the wrist and he's like, we have to go, we have to run. So they run and they run and they run and they run along the roads, into ditches, hiding from cars, every single car that drives past, through the snow, in the freezing, getting soaking wet. He's never lets go of her once. He's just running and dragging and climbing through gardens and over walls and not being seen. It's just awful. Like, at one point, Gillian just thought that she was going to die of exposure. And I mean, I'm sitting in a shed and my feet are frozen and I want a cup of tea, and I'm just like, oh, can you imagine that? Like, running through the ice and the snow and the cold and just being wet as well, on top of like being freezing, until they reach some properties. And he says, who lives here and who lives there? And she's like, oh, that's Mr. and Mrs. Frost, and Mr. Frost is a mechanic. So he's like, we're going there. So they do. They knock on the door. They let them in. Gillian says, we need a tow. And like, I mean, come on. Jill at this point knows that she can't trust Billy anymore. So they've knocked on the door and it's Madge and Ron. And Ron's like, well, I'll sort you out. I'll get you a tow, blah, blah, blah. And Madge is like, something's not right here. She's like, he's weird. They're soaking wet. What's going on? And as they're talking, Gillian says, she mouths the words like that. And that's when obviously Madge is like, whoa, okay, this is serious. So off they go. When they've left, Madge is like in an absolute state of despair. She's starting to think and realise that this guy might be that man. So she goes to a neighbour, and she tells the neighbour, and she's hysterical. She's like, I can't ring the police because he might hurt Ron. No one wants to ring the police in this story. Very frustrating. So yeah, she's like, I can't ring the police, I can't get them involved because he will hurt Ron. In the meantime, they've poodled along to Pottery Cottage in the van. Ron says that the entire journey, Gillian was like literally hugging him, like holding on to him, and he thought it was really weird, which it is weird if you didn't know what's going on. And then he started to think about this. He was like, who's this guy? They're soaking wet, like this guy's a weirdo. And she seems terrified, and then he starts putting two and two together. So they get to Pottery Cottage and he does help them. He does tow them. It takes 3 attempts. And again, you're like, oh my God, just get it done. They get it done and off they speed. Ron, he drives back. He drives to go home and he's stopped by police at Pottery Cottage. He's towed Gillian and her car with Billy in it and Gillian away because, like, they were like, you know, when you try and, like, what is it, like jump start? I don't know. But they're like, come on, like trying to get it going, and it wasn't working, but Billy hadn't turned the ignition on. So he'd driven them off quite a way, and then they got going. So he then had to turn back, and then he arrived back at Pottery Cottage. So they weren't far off, and that's where he was met by the police. So by this time, Len and Joyce, the retired teachers from Seconds, they had reached somewhere and they had phoned for help, and the help came. And then they surrounded the house, Pottery Cottage, and then what they discovered was grim. They forced entry into the cottage and there was music blaring from an upstairs window. So that was Sarah's bedroom, probably to hide any sounds of what was going on, which is just awful. They went upstairs and they found the body of Richard. He was face down on the landing with his head sort of against near a chest of drawers, and he'd been stabbed in his neck and his chest, and he was dead. And then it was sad, like he'd nearly got his hands free from his ties. It's just so sad. And then they went downstairs and they found the body of Arthur, and he was in the annex living room. Again, he had wounds to his neck and his chest. When they went outside, they then found the body of Amy, and she was underneath some snow outside near the garage. And when they then re-entered the property, they found the body of Sarah, and she was upstairs in her grandparents' bedroom in the fetal position, and she also had injuries to her neck and her chest. And it's just, I mean, it's grim, isn't it? And it was thought that Arthur and Sarah, they didn't make it past that first evening. And I just think that's just so sad. He lied the whole time about them being okay, and really they were dead from the beginning. So that very first night, and I think it was because they were his biggest threat really in the end. Arthur was not going out without a fight, was he? I mean, I know he was tied up, but he was determined, and he was not a happy bunny about this situation. He was going to give him problems. And Sarah, bless her, was just, she's a kid, and kids, they talk and they don't shut up and they don't understand situations. And I think he just knew that he had to if he was going to be able to be there for how long he was. And it's just so sad. And now I can let it go because, like, yeah, to be honest, it was just not very nice. They found the burgers and the food that they'd been making for them. They weren't eating them. They found it all, like, he was just dumping it. And he was just, like, leaving, like, tipping the tea out and taking the empty cups and stuff back. They weren't even alive after the first night. And it's just, like, horrible. I'm going to have to pause again because my feet are so cold. Cut and edit. I'm back for the final cut of this video. Let's go. After the discovery of everybody's bodies at Pottery Cottage, Gillian and Billy are off, and it is not long before they are pursued by police. So now they know what car they're in because they have witnesses, and the police really aren't far behind them now at this point. This is when it all turns into a massive high-speed police chase. It goes on and it goes on and it goes on. Gillian is petrified for her life. She was certain that she was going to die in that car. After a while of this high-speed chasing, Billy loses control and he crashes into a wall, and the police approach him. The car is, like, dead, and he puts a knife straight to Gillian's throat. Like, you know, he's holding her hostage, isn't he? He's not going to just hand himself in at this point. So the policemen know that there's a Land Rover, like, literally round the corner that they can hop into and carry on pursuing Billy and Gillian in. So they suggest that Billy takes Gillian and gets into their car because his one is like a is a wreck now. Gillian's really not happy about this, but what choice does she have in the matter? She's like still a hostage in this situation. They really like push it on Billy that he can take their Marina, that's the car that they're driving, as long as he like does nothing to Jill and keeps her safe, he can go off in their Marina. I mean, it's not ideal, is it? Because again, they're going to know exactly what car he's in, but this is the situation Billy and Jill are in now. So he does. He has the knife to Gillian's throat and the police let him take the Marina. Really quickly, this Land Rover appears and they then hop into that car and start the chase again. So it's like a proper cat and mouse. Like, they're like, well, I'm going to let you go a little bit, and then they're right back there following them again. Chief Inspector Peter Howes is called into the situation. So he comes along and he enters the scene, if you like. A roadblock is set up in a village called Reno. I think I'm saying that correctly. Rainbow without the B. Reno. And it involves, it's like something out of a film. It involves like a bus and all sorts going on. And this police officer like puts a stop police or accident sign in the road. And this is what scuppers Billy. So after, again, more chasing, he then comes to this situation and the sign, the police sign, just gets stuck underneath the Marina and he crashes into a wall again. A few times now, Billy's crashed into a wall. Billy smashes the back windows of the Marina with his axe. At this point, Jill is just completely amazed that she is alive. She's just been in this 2 high-speed chases, one after another. God knows what she's thinking. There's a lot going on. She's witnessed something that she's not comprehended at the time with her mum being dragged through like snow, and poor Jill. So she is just sitting in this car thinking, what? Like, I'm alive. Like, I cannot believe it. She's in like complete shock. Inspector Howes comes up to the Marina. At this point, Billy has got Gillian. It's a bit frantic now. He's got an axe very near to her head. So, excuse me, it is really hot in here because I thought it would be a good idea to put the sauna on to warm it up a bit, and then turn it off, but I'm actually sweating to death. Billy's like, I'm going to kill her. I'm just going to kill her. He's swinging this axe about near her head. She's screaming. She's like not happy at all, crying. And Chief Inspector Howes is just like, come on. And he's really trying to talk him down. He's like in hostage negotiations, basically, with Billy. Gillian was shaking so much out of fear, as you would be. Her whole body was like shaking. Her legs were shaking and she couldn't control it. And Billy's like getting cross with her. At one point, he mentions to the Chief Inspector Howes that he's got a knife to her heart. So as well as this axe that's flying around, he's also got a knife as well to make it seem a little bit more like terrifying, as if it isn't already. And Gillian's like, but you haven't. He's like, just play along. And again, she sort of like plays along with Billy, and there's so much control in this story. Gillian just went along with Billy. Eventually, they realised that trying to talk him down just wasn't going to work. They'd mentioned Chief Inspector Howes had mentioned his wife, and that just made Billy crazy because he was like, oh, I hate her and I don't care, and was being very boastful about all these things he's done in the past and violent crimes and hurting people, and he didn't care about anyone and blah blah blah. So then Chief Inspector Howes tries to play on the fact that, well, you know, Gillian's been really good to you. Let's forget your wife because that made you mad. Now let's focus on Gillian. Like, she's looked after you for 3 days and she's always done what you said and blah, 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 blah. Really trying to sort of get to the heart of Billy and think about what who he's got here. This woman has just been nothing but good to you. While this is all going on, Nichols and Pell, they arrive and they are the guys with the guns. Okay, so they've called like in the tactical team now, because he's, it's a hostage situation and he's got weapons. Billy starts getting a bit bolshy in this old hostage situation. He's obviously got wet feet again. And he's like, I need a pair of boots, size 8 please. I want another car, I want this, I want that, I want cigarettes, and all of these demands. He's in the car, he's got Gillian, and with an axe and a knife. So he's like, okay, I'm going to make some demands, please, thank you. Seen a few movies, know how this goes. They, again, trying to get him out of the car. They've given him his cigarettes, they've given him his size 8 boots, which the police officer that they took them from was really unimpressed with. I think he got given a pair of welly boots or something. He's had these things and they're like, look, okay, get out of the car and go to this escape car, we'll sort you out again. And I think at this point they're hoping just to get him out of the car because now the guys with the big guns are here. So, you know, they might have an opportunity there to take him down. But it doesn't go to plan. Gillian freaks like hell. She's like, this happened before and he actually got me in a car and drove me off again. Like, where does this end? Do you know what I mean? I'd be thinking the same as her. Like, are you crazy? I've got to get in another vehicle with this man? No. So she actually freaks out and she's like, she's not having it at all. She doesn't want to go and she freaks. Billy is not happy with this at all. The situation is like getting to a crescendo. You know, they've gone through all of this. They're having all of these chats and hostage situation conversations and he's surrounded now, but they're trying to make it seem like he's not. So a lot of police presence is sort of being hidden away, especially the guys with the guns. It's like he can't see them. The main focus is Billy and Chief Inspector House. So that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep it like really mellow so that Billy doesn't feel like he's in this like enclosed situation with like all these hundreds of people all surrounding him, because that's when he'll do something crazy. Gillian's freaking out. Billy's shaking her now. Like he's so frustrated, so that it's getting really heated. Everyone's in position. House makes a move towards the car. Not drastically, but it's thought that when he does so, his shadow became more of a... His shadow freaked Billy out, basically. It was more ominous that what House was doing than he intended. And at this point, Billy just... He was like, I'm done. And he goes a-swinging with his axe. He says something to the effect of, time's up. At this point, House reacts like a cat and he jumps through the back window of the car and kind of tackles Billy. I mean, this axe-wielding maniac, and this House is just like, I mean, what? See, now this is what I imagine it's like in the movies. I'm like, wait, they're here to save the day. It must go wrong often, but... And it was later on said that people were like, you're mad. If that had gone the other way, you would have no career now. But the fact that it went the right way, he's a hero. So he's tackling Billy with this axe. The axe has made contact with Gillian's head, but not in a life-threatening way at all. And I think House jumping through the back window, like, sort of knocked Billy off of his stride, I guess. The impact that he would have had on Gillian was stunted by House jumping through the back of the car window. But Billy's like a machine. Billy just keeps going. He's still swinging the axe. Now it's made contact, but the back side of it, not the sharp side of it, with over and over again on House's, on the Chief Inspector's arm. So his arm's like dead. At this point, Nichols and Pels, it's down to them. The first shot fired is shot by Pels and it shoots Billy in the scalp. But okay, you know, to me, it must have grazed, I'm not sure. It's like it just bounced off his head. Like, oh, it's just so scary. It's like, he's like a monster that won't be taken down. So Billy carries on. He's still like fighting for his life, basically. Pels shoots again, this time through the passenger window, and it enters into his shoulder and into his thorax. And still, Billy carries on. It's like not breaking his stride at all. This is when I'm reading this and just thinking like, okay, where is this going to end? What's going to happen? Poor old Pels, he shoots a third time and misses completely. And then Nichols comes up beside him, I don't know if I'm saying that right, and he delivers the final and fatal shot. House remembers feeling Billy sort of shudder and then go limp. All of the bodies were then, including Billy's, taken for autopsy. The photographer that photographed the crime scene at Pottery Cottage said it it haunted him really, and things really stayed with him for quite a long time afterwards. Lots of moments of domesticity and things peppered through the story, which make it really surreal. And sometimes I felt like I wasn't reading a true crime story. I was reading and researching a horror story, like a fictional book or a film. So it was a really strange case to cover, actually. Really, really sadly, after some time in hospital and being sedated, as you would have to be, Gillian was then told by Superintendent Morris that her entire family had been killed. I mean, what do you do with that? She was really heavily sedated and she stayed in hospital for a time. She then left hospital and lived with some friends, and it was just awful because she was just hounded by the press. They never left her alone, to the point which she then, after years, moved forward with her life, met somebody and moved to Scotland to start again. She did give her story to a journalist, and on telling that story, it was said that she was just so deeply, and what do you do with that? Your whole family. She was like really deeply and affected when she retold her story. And it's fascinating, the fact that she did so thoroughly, because you can read the book that was written and there's lots of things in the press. It's just sad that after that fact she wasn't left alone to grieve and move on without press coverage, basically. So I don't want to go into it much more than that, because she obviously wants to just start again. So I didn't look any further than after she moved to Scotland, because let's let her be. A really tragic case. Like I say, I don't normally cover ones with children. I find it difficult. But this case was so interesting and so unusual and surreal and like a movie and a book that I was captured and I was intrigued. But I'm glad it is done and that I have shared the story with you so that I can move on to something new. I must admit, at times it got to me a bit. So, cheers. Thank you so much for joining me for this two-parter for the first time. Very exciting. I hope you will join me next week for another true crime video and a mug or a glass or a vase of gin. Bye!